This is Talking Hardcore, the podcast for people who love hardcore history.
You study history because it allows us to understand the present and prepare for the future.
I'm not trolling.
And I love it.
I'm just pointing out where they're wrong.
The Talking Hardcore podcast is presented by Ace Industrial Solutions. Are you in need of skilled trade professionals for your next project? Look no further.
Today we're going to talk about A Fly on the Wall of James Burke, which is Hardcore History, episode 19?
Yeah.
19.
So can we call this a gnat on the wall of James Burke?
No.
Okay.
I'm not naming it that.
That's kind of
Nobody will get it but us.
Well, unless, there you go.
That's too inside baseball. Anyway, Matt, we got Matt here. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
What's up, guys?
So you just listened to the episode again. Scott and I did. Give us your thoughts, Matt.
Well, the first thing that comes across is like Dan is humbly diminishing of his earlier work, and this is just a fantastic episode, even in short form. There's a lot of good information there. In the way I just got done listening to you guys interview Dan, and this is one of his geek out experiences talking to James Burke, right?
Yep.
You can
It's
tell,
funny.
you know.
It's funny because I was listening to it. I was thinking of that same thing. I'm like, holy shit, this is Dan interviewing somebody like we just interviewed him. Obviously, he was way better at it, but it's pretty interesting.
And he asked great questions and brought the conversation all over the place. One thing that James was talking about earlier on was revisionist history and sort of historiography. And that's something that you guys kind of covered. But revisionist history is something that's been in my mind a lot lately.
Matt, can you pause for 1 second? I want to go ahead and tell people. So episode 19, Dan Carlin does an interview with historian, media personality James Burke. Okay. And if you haven't listened, go download the old episodes from dancarlin.com, listen to it, and then come back and listen to this. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, James, they're talking about revisionist history, and that's something that's been on my mind a lot lately, not only with the series of episodes by The Rest is History regarding the Aztecs, which was phenomenal, and I'm sure we'll continue to tout as we continue these conversations.
We're going to do a whole series. We're going to do a special on that. So
look forward to that, people. It's going to be great.
So good.
But also just kind of in my own work, I'm really interested in it. And something, I think it was also on The Rest is History. They had, I think his name is Frank McDonough. He did a book or a series of books called The Hitler Years. And so The Rest is History did a series about Rise and Fall of the Nazis. And they had McDonough on there, and he was just like, dude, I thought I knew a lot about that stuff. You know, I've read tons. And then he was just plugging information in. I was like, dude, I really need to go back and read his stuff because it's not, I think the term revisionist history kind of has certain connotations to it. And there's one side and another side. Like one way we're going to change history for a certain intention and use it to our own purposes. The other is history is not set. Historiography is a consensus of sources. We're continually learning new things. I don't know if you just saw that thing I posted in the Discord, but they just found Philip II of Macedon's tomb with his wife Cleopatra and their infant daughter, who was assassinated by Alexander after Philip died and he took power. Like they found that they confirmed.
I'm going to look that up as soon as we're done with this.
It's one of the most recent things on there. It's one.
Right, check the link in the Discord for check the link in the description for an invite to the Discord channel for Hardcore History. And Matt has a whole conversation there about media sharing that shares articles. If you want to find that,
it's one of the most recent ones in the media sharing. Right
I will check that out. I can't believe I missed that. That is awesome.
They found Hephaestion's tomb probably. They found Philip II. We're honing in on Alexander, but obviously that's the bigger fish to catch. The point is that we can learn new things. New things are coming out. There's new methods of finding stuff. And, every once in a while, things require revising. It's not, sacrosanct material. It should be fluid. And they discussed that there with something that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I probably shouldn't bring this up, so I just gloss over that one.
So I like it. Scott has gotten so good at this podcasting stuff now that he stops before he swallows his foot. The problem is some of our best content is you choking on your foot.
Fine.
So if you want to say it, say it.
So my cousin not too long ago brought up a book about Andrew Jackson, And I can't tell you, like, I don't know where the author got these sources. I don't even remember what book it was, but some of the stuff that my cousin was telling me was in the book, I just found it hard to believe. Like,
right.
I just,
And it might be true and it might not be. A lot of times there's a political motive to things like that.
But
right?
And my point is about the revisionist history, right? So, like you were saying, Matt, some things are good, some things are bad, some things are politically driven. You want to revise history, like, okay, this happened on this date instead, or you know what I mean? Like, but to completely change a narrative on somebody's life, like when it just
right.
It was an interesting conversation. So,
and I think there's a revisionist history, and then there's political hack jobs. Okay, so don't confuse the two. What Dan was talking about and what James Burke was talking about in this, and what Dan talked about with us, is we interpret history and what's happening through the light of what's happening with us today. And to me, I also think about it like this. We take different lessons from history based on in light of what is happening to us today.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
So that means whatever happened. Our understanding of what happened changes because we also have all this other knowledge about human nature, but also we have more information that can change. And we also learn, okay, well, this guy who we've been taking as an honest truth teller, we now know he's a liar based on these other sources. So we're going to not believe what he said about that. So that's not really revisionist history in a negative way. It's just our picture's getting clearer, or at least it seems to be getting clearer.
It's important, and nothing should be totally set in stone. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
exactly.
like just going back to the Hitler stuff. Like I base an incredible amount of my knowledge on John Toland's what I consider to be definitive biography. That I've read like 5 biographies of him, and some of them are just not objective. Like there's a personal opinion in there, and then you read that one and it's neutral but also comprehensive. And then McDonagh comes along and kind of refutes or updates some of that stuff in there, and it's you have that feeling where you're like, I don't believe this, and then you're like, oh, okay, I should just let go of my preconceptions and go with the new material. It's
and
important,
maybe that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as far as relating history to our present circumstances, I think that's unavoidable, and I think it's very important that we do that. Seeing history through our current lens. People in history had no idea we were going to exist, and they had no premonition of our civilization, so they were just living their lives, and it's important to see them as they were. But seeing history through the lens of current events is how it folds forward and grows on itself and actually becomes the foundation. I like to say history is who we are, but not who we have to be.
Right. Or who we were, anyway.
True. But then you can say that, it's a complete... You could say everything's reflective, though. You could say, like, anybody in 15th century England was reflecting back on Aristotle. You know what I mean? Like, it really depends. I mean, if everybody keeps reflecting back...
Well,
it depends on their knowledge and the influence of their cultures.
Sure. We have way more knowledge of the past than they did, right?
Right. Like nowadays, an average person can go into a bookstore and pick up a book that has literally the history of the entire world in it. Okay.
But if you're living, easier, can take out this magic device that lives in their pocket.
Yeah.
And look it
exactly.
Up instantly.
Exactly. Right.
Instantly.
But if you're a peasant living in Western Europe in the the High Middle Ages, then your society. Your lifestyle probably hasn't changed for thousands of years, but as far as the big governmental stuff, those people were trying to catch up to Rome and emulate Rome and pick up the pieces of Rome, and then you had the influence of the church in there.
But this brings us right back to James Burke, right? Because that's what he was talking about with Dan. The reason he's optimistic for the future is because we are increasing exponentially the amount of brain power we can bring to the world by increasing the literacy and access to information to more and more people every day. Now, instead of just the elite that can read and have access to manuscripts, it's everybody, or soon to be everybody, hopefully will be everybody. And there's negative consequences of that too, but they're worth it.
Well, you're right. But then there's people that don't utilize the tool that they have in the palm of their hand. I mean, I've met, whatever. I've met people that are like, oh, how do you change a light fixture? Well, dude, you have YouTube. There's 50 guys on there that can tell you how to change a light fixture.
Sure, but the thing is that James Burke, right? He talked about how amazing the human brain is. Okay?
Sure.
And that's in general. Now, everybody's brains are different. There are, and this is legit true, there are shitty, dumb people out there that have brains that don't work as good. And then there's people like me who I feel like my brain works okay. I've talked to people who I know their brain works better than mine. And I know it. Like, you can feel it. Like, when you're talking to somebody that's that well equipped at it, you're like, oh, well, their brain's better, and that's okay. Everybody's brains are different, and just because their brain's better doesn't mean that they're going to be better for society.
Well, I think James Burke would agree to disagree with.
Well,
that.
He'd be wrong. I'm sorry, but I would go to war with James Burke over that, because there are differences in humans. Okay, and there are smarter people and dumber people, but what you do by increasing literacy and access to information is you increase the overall chance of finding the smart people, because
It's true.
Those smart people a lot of times would have never got found.
Well, then here's the question.
Absolutely.
So this is a question for you guys. So everybody knows Albert Einstein, Oppenheimer. I mean, you could
Right.
jump out like 20 big names, right?
Yeah.
Where are those people today?
They're all over the place. They're building this. They're shooting rockets to space with SpaceX. They're working on Mars trips. They're doing all kinds of stuff. There's so much information. You're cherry picking.
Just looking at Einstein, I'm going to take this person by person and period by period. Now, of course, Oppenheimer and Einstein overlapped, but I'm going to do two distinct things here. Einstein provided the theory of relativity at a time when one area was burgeoning into another. He was at the forefront of a new wave of science, and there was a lot of ignorant stuff going on and very postulation. And it was just time for that to happen. It hadn't happened yet. Okay. Now, those people might still be out there. What's the new frontier? Quantum mechanics and string theory and all this kind of stuff. So we are seeing people like that. Feynman, comes up a lot. There's some very, very, very intelligent people out there doing the work, and we don't know their names because they're more in the background. But if you listen to like Brett Weinstein, or not Brett Weinstein, but his brother, Eric Weinstein.
And I was going to just mention him.
He does a podcast where he's honestly just asked who's the most intelligent person. He's like, this dude, like everybody knows him, but you don't, you know what I mean? Right. Oppenheimer, his achievements were propelled by great necessity, which was the war. Where's our war? Where's our great necessity?
Oppenheimer's genius was not his genius. It was ability to get geniuses to get shit done.
Sometimes, conducting the orchestra is the great achievement, right?
Right. But Eric Weinstein talks about this too, and his podcast was called Dark Horse. He doesn't really do it anymore. But he talked about this. He's like, physics took a dead end 40 years ago, and it's stuck. And there haven't been really very much since then.
That's a very real conversation. Yeah, it's a very real narrative that's going on right now.
It's like, hey, we need to get back to the best people getting to work on things instead of being stuck defending their
he gives an actual cause for it. He was talking on another podcast, and they were like, he was like, what do you miss, or what about it? And he's like, back in the day, probably the 1920s, cowboy physics were like, universities would like, who's the most brilliant dude? Bring him here. Here's a bunch of money. Go make it great. See you around. That's it. Now it's all micromanaged and like, applying for funds.
Are you writing papers?
Totally different environment. Yeah, exactly.
Are you writing papers? You need to be publishing. If you're not publishing, then we're not going to get any more government funding. And 100% it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And, but then there's people like Elon, who's doing his best to push the ball forward by getting smart people together to work on things that he thinks are important.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, putting a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
And hopefully there's more people like him. So, but
you lead the way, you're going to take the most hits, you know what I mean? And so that guy gets a lot of flack. I read his biography about Walter Isaacson, the guy who does all the famous biographies. He did Einstein and, Picasso. And
was it good?
Steve Jobs. Yeah, it was a good biography. It actually breaks down his operational capacity at his various factories, which has been a matter of some dispute. It talks about like all the things that are popping up in the news nowadays, and he's getting flack about is like, well, this was actually in the works for 20 years, and he's not doing it the way he wanted to. It's just a lot of good history, and it kind of clears up everything about his dad and all this kind of stuff. And it does, and it ends with the whole thing. The same thing about Steve Jobs does. Achieving all this, excuse you being an asshole? No, of course not. But it is very interesting.
But it kind of
I was inspired by that. I mean, I'm
gotcha.
A very clear critic of his social faux pas, but I was inspired by reading his story because it's very clear what he's trying to do, and it's very much what you're saying, George. He is trying to inspire people, get the ball moving forward, get us off this planet, take us to the next stage, cut through all the bureaucracy that comes with government funding, and just do it because he can.
Right, because he could just be sailing around on a yacht banging hot chicks.
Yeah,
like legit. Most people with that kind of money, that's what they do.
Yeah,
the vast majority.
Yeah,
and his life would be infinitely easier.
It would be. If he just did that. Yeah.
I mean, imagine how much less crap he would take.
Oh, for sure.
So he just posted something on Twitter today, or X, that they installed the first Neuralink.
Yep.
In a human.
Cool. Wow, that's a big deal. I remember when they came out with that, and they were just doing the testing on pigs, and they were recruiting people. So that's a major leap forward.
It's scary, but it's also like he said, the first people that they're going to put it in is people who are injured. Because
the first application of that will be for medical purposes. Yeah.
Well, imagine. Okay, so you have somebody who's handicapped, and there's a disconnect in their spinal cord between their brain and their legs. But you can Bluetooth that shit.
Yep.
You can Bluetooth that shit. Holy crap, is that amazing? I mean,
that is, everybody better just shut up about the guy if that works, right? Because that is a huge benefit to the human race.
Huge. Yeah. I mean, imagine the kids that are born like that, right? That are born like that they could just live a normal life.
And that's the kind of stuff you read about in science fiction novels.
It also could be some really terrible shit with the Neuralink too.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that you don't do it because you're worried about that.
Right. You do it, and then you have conversations along the way with appropriate authorities as to guidelines and safeguards,
Yeah,
the same way they're doing with AI.
Do you trust the government to safeguard Neuralinks? Like, if you're okay, you can't have them let them have a backdoor into everybody's brains.
Yeah,
right. That's scary enough, right
Straight
there.
Up what it would be. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's why I will never get one. Right, unless barring some kind of catastrophic injury, I will never get one.
Or your brain gets hacked.
Yeah, I mean, think about that shit. That's terrible.
I write stuff projecting into the future, and it's absolutely at a certain point networked consciousness of the entire race.
Right.
Like everybody's got those implants. Privacy has a whole new meaning, and and you have and publicly sharing things is commonplace. Yeah, like that.
Yeah, luckily I'll be dead before that shit could be really implemented.
You'll be dead before my book gets published.
No.
I agree.
No, I read it. It'll get published before that.
No, it's another one. Yeah, but still.
No, I read. Well, your second book that I read.
It's in there too. Yeah,
it's in there too.
Yeah. It's a common theme for me because I think that's where we're going.
Well, seems likely.
But then you skip, let's just say for the sake of argument, you skip CRISPR and just start making superhumans.
Well, that's what they do it through CRISPR.
But
what do you mean?
I'm implanting, like the Neuralink. So you skip CRISPR.
Well, the CRISPR gives you humans with no diseases and humans.
Yeah, CRISPR is an editing tool. It's like removing things
with genius brains, and then you stick the Neuralink in there, and then what do you have? You have super soldiers that are super geniuses.
Yeah.
As far as network consciousness goes for that, there's a book called The Peripheral by Philip K. Dick, and he I've only seen the show, so it's only from the show that I'm knowing this, but soldiers have network consciousness for their squads, and they all can read each other's minds and stuff, so they make the most tightly formed platoon that you can possibly imagine.
Did he write Slaughterhouse 5?
No, that was Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay, I didn't like that book.
Hold on. You don't want super smart giant soldiers.
Right.
You don't. That's not what you want.
100%.
You want army ants, and then you want
really smart, smaller guys.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Because then
I don't know. Jocko's not tiny. But we need to get back to James Burke. We have not talked. Okay.
So another thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, Matt, you fire away.
Oh yeah, another thing that stood out to me in this episode was Burke talking about not only revisionist history but revisionist education, and the whole concept that you need a PhD to be considered intelligent or informed. And folks, guys, George Scott, is Dan Carlin a historian?
I think he's just a fan of history.
He's an amateur historian. He's a
right.
He's a fan of
Would
history.
you consider him to be a historian? Right? I mean, he basically is.
But I
think he is.
Right. I said in the
he
interview,
doesn't have a PhD.
I learned more from Dan than I did in my degree.
Exactly. Yeah, he's a modern historian, and maybe we could come up with a new term where we call them historytellers.
Well, I mean, he's an oral historian.
Yep.
Right.
And maybe that's the way to do it.
He's highly regarded. He's educational.
He does more research than most professors that write about a subject, and that's not close. And that's what we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about earlier about, revisionist history. Well, that's why Dan, and he talked about this on the podcast, that's why he reads 30 freaking books on a subject.
Yeah.
So that he gets a really well-rounded view. Now, the nice thing is, he does that so we don't have to, because I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have time for that, which is another reason I have a Patreon account set up. So when he drops a new episode, I kick him some money, because I don't have time to read all those books, and they're expensive.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper to pay Dan $10 when a new episode comes out than it is to read 30 books.
Mm-hmm.
But okay,
he's probably bringing to the fore the parts that would stand out to me the most, anyways. So that's what it's
right, exactly. So one of the things that James Burke talked about that popped out to me is he talked about this culture here, specifically in America, where there was always more. You could just go, if you wanted more, you could go west. That's how the people got here in the first place, right? Europeans got here because it was, you can have some land instead of being a serf. Well, I'll go. You can. Well, now most of these Native Americans died. That's pretty empty. I'll go fight for that. I'll go, and I'll keep going and keep going. And that reminded me of Frederick Jackson Turner. I don't know if you ever read his, I can't remember the name of the book, but his thesis was the presence of the frontier is what spawned the whole idea of the American dream and American exceptionalism, right? The idea that you actually could work hard, go get something, work hard for it, and make it work. In Europe, that was dead.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
It's been dead for a while.
It was dead because it was full.
Yep.
Right? It was full. The presence of that frontier, and now that closed effectively in like 1914. And now maybe that's what we're seeing is the death of that whole American dream. It's still part of the culture.
I've sensed that before. That's speaking to my subconscious, man.
Right. So like, and I'm not saying like literally, I'm saying like the in the culture, right? There's this whole generation of young people that think the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and the idea that you can achieve something on your own or through hard work is ridiculous. And that's because there's not been a frontier for a long time.
I think you're right. The frontier does epitomize the American dream in that it is a way to become anything you want, okay, and also to build your world according to your own independence.
Right, and incentivize hard work.
Yeah, exactly. That's
if you're surfing Europe in 1600s,
you're going to work hard, but you ain't going to see much of it. Yeah.
But it doesn't.
So what's the equivalent of that nowadays? I mean,
but that's why it's still true nowadays. That's why I think those kids that think that are wrong.
Well, 100%.
Because America, we have this culture that was built on that, and it's still true because of the culture. Here, if you work hard, you can go up. There's no rigid class structure.
Right.
Okay? No matter where you come from in this country, you can succeed. Now, it's not going to be the same level of difficulty for everybody. Some people, it will be easier where they start than where some people start. And that's life. That sucks, but that's life. But everybody can.
The problem is, and I think this is when it comes to having a job or being somewhere, I think the problem roots into there's a lot of people that don't want you to branch out on your own. It's not that they don't want you to do it, but they didn't do it, so they want you to stay at that job in the corporation. It's like a push.
I think that's way less common here than in other countries, though. Here, there is a whole structure in place to help entrepreneurs. And it's not always as good as it should be.
I'm not saying entrepreneurs.
No, but I'm saying to start your own business, to do that, right?
Sure.
So you'll listen to people from England, and they come over here, and they're like, this is amazing. Everybody here is like encouraging you to start a business or to try hard and to invent something. They're like, back home, everybody's like, what are you going to do? You're not going to do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Just shut up. Just sit there. Just do your job.
Yep.
They don't have that culture of trying to make something amazing.
There's no end game. Yeah.
But
right.
It'll be taken.
But that's where that all comes from.
Some of that culture still exists here.
Of course.
Like you're just a mechanic. You're not going to be anything great, until
you'll get some assholes for sure.
But then, if you hear that from enough people or you're stuck in that job, you don't have to stay.
Right.
And you know what? It sucks. It's scary. I'm speaking from experience. It is very scary to take the leap. Or when your boss is whatever.
Right.
When something's being told to you that doesn't make sense or is actually detrimental, you don't have to put up with that crap. I mean, it's too hard to explain.
No, but you're right. But in some countries you do.
Sure.
Right. But that's why America is amazing, is because you literally don't. It's $35 to start a business. There's so much more availability, and it's dangerous and it's risky, right? It can be.
But it's all about hustle and drive.
It can be.
And then what am I going to do next?
It can be, right? And you could be really driven and hustle really hard and still fail.
Sure.
But at least here you have the opportunity to do those things.
If you're financially stable enough.
Even if you're not.
Well,
fuck, poor people do amazing things and come out of that's what's great about America. There's a long list
to you.
There's a long list.
Let me put it this way.
Other countries, and go look in history in other countries about the number of amazing people that started from poor beginnings, and it's a lot smaller.
Sure, but they didn't get there rapidly.
Yeah.
Okay. They didn't get there in their 20s because they didn't have. They had to work their way up to those advantages financially, or to where they could get the credit,
maybe,
or to where they could.
You're just assuming. I don't know. We don't have any data on that. You don't know. That's just a guess, and you might be right.
Look at the Colonel,
but you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You talking about Colonel Sanders?
Yeah.
Okay.
He didn't start KFC till how old?
Yeah, but
55.
He was also like go look at his life. He was like arrested a few times for domestic violence. If I remember correctly. If I remember correctly.
Let's do an episode on that guy.
Well,
I think it was the way I heard it did one about him, if I remember correctly.
The legend was, though, they said, "What are you really good at?" And he goes, "I make some good fried chicken."
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were like, "Well, then why don't you do that?"
I think he was working at a gas station making the chicken.
Did a judge tell him that when he was about to be arrested for domestic?
Okay, and I hope I'm right about that, but I remember reading that or hearing that in a podcast. So, but I mean, it's like that guy. The reason he didn't do that till he was 55 is because he wasn't really good at anything else, and then it finally occurred to him, well, I make really good fried chicken, and then it was able to do it. But the point is, Scott, that whole idea of people trying hard, that could be tied to the idea of the frontier, and that's where that culture was started in the first place.
What's the new frontier?
That was Frederick Jackson Turner's thesis. I wish I could remember the book, but it was something.
I think that's absolutely correct, and I think Europe was a stagnant place full of overcrowded cities that were highly taxed by a monarchy, and then we got here. It was open fields and and fresh game and all over the place.
Get smallpox.
We built our own world,
that was
but
there.
now we're crowded again. And where's the new place to go? Is it
I don't
space?
think we are
Is it
crowded,
science?
Well,
there's plenty of open land in America, but yeah.
Right.
Well, look at Russia.
Can you just go stake your claim somewhere?
Yeah, but there's huge swaths.
That's why I want to conquer Canada.
There's huge swaths of Canada, Russia,
Oh yeah.
I mean, that are just completely devoid of civilization.
Right.
I mean,
and so if James Burke is right, we don't need
But go
less
buy
people.
one. How much does it cost per acre?
Sure. But it's
you can't just
it's
go
more
plant a
than it
flag
used to
and
be.
build a fence.
Way more than it used to be. 100% right, Matt.
Yeah.
But it's at least achievable here.
It is.
Well,
Right. Right now, maybe it's not so much. I mean, then we're at a point where property prices are high. Right. But it is cyclical, and they're still cheaper than it has been historically when, say, you're in Europe and all of the land belongs to either the monarch or the people he gave it to, and you don't ever get to own any.
You have no hope
unless
of doing so.
unless you're knighted. You know, like.
Yeah.
So what if the next frontier is at the ocean floor?
See, the frontier no longer is the frontier like you're thinking of it. That's what it was. Now it's
Physical.
Technological.
Sure.
Yeah. Now it's the internet. It's everything.
Well, you're right. And what the .com boom proved that it was a new frontier where you could build anything you wanted, and you could be independent because you could like write some code, build a useful website, and you are an independent business person who is all of a sudden, well off. It is. It really is.
If you could live at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not out of places, so it's kind of silly to worry about that because we got plenty of land.
Or the moon.
Okay,
Let's go to the moon.
What James Burke was talking about. So you think about it, everybody's so worried. There's so many people so worried about overpopulation. But I would have to imagine that James Burke would absolutely be worried about the other way.
Depopulation?
Because he thinks that the best thing we could do for the future is give more human brains access to information and opportunity. The way you do that is making more people and making more opportunity for those people.
I agree with that.
The best resources, the best natural resources on the planet are our brains.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at all the amazing shit.
There's this great book called How to Fly a Horse, The History of Creativity and Inventiveness.
Well, that's you can't fly a horse, Matt.
Really? Watch me. I'm going to build a flying horse, and I'm going to make $1 million. And it says that early on, probably turn of the century, 1900s, it gives an absolute metric here. He's like, I think he was talking about New York City in particular, but this probably applies everywhere. As more patent offices opened up, the amount of patents increased. Okay, now that may seem very simple, but it just means that the availability of a resource for creativity brings in all these people who had it in them already. Okay. And James Burke says in the episode, he says, when they invented the printing press, some people argued that this is going to put books in the hands of people, who have no business reading books. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
And he defied that, immediately. And it speaks to what you're saying, George, is that everybody has that spark in them, given an opportunity. Maybe they won't use the internet to build something new. Maybe they'll use it to, whatever. But giving the majority of people will fall on the side of creativity, inventiveness, and it's just you're going to err on the side of a more productive civilization.
Right. I don't even know if it's a majority, but I don't think it needs to be.
I think it's over
the fact
half.
that I don't even know.
I don't.
The fact is,
maybe 10%.
enough people will do great things with it that it benefits the whole human race.
Yeah,
and so you just talked about it, James Burke, when he was talking about the printing press, and that part struck me too, because I've often compared the internet to the printing press on this podcast, because it caused turmoil for 100 to 200 years. The Protestant Reformation, all that couldn't have been possible without the printing press. It caused all kinds of issues, right? And the internet is like that times 1,000. And James Burke, Dan asked him about that, and James Burke says, well, we're just in the transition phase.
Yeah.
Which is true, but that assumes we can survive the transition phase. And we probably will. That's where I come down on it. I feel like it's more likely than not we will, but I think it's possible we don't.
How many foreign powers were using the printing press to sow the seeds of dissension in our society?
Right.
There's that aspect of it too. Like when you say that, it makes me think of the distinctions, like the social. Could someone pick up a newspaper write an op-ed or a personal editorial or whatever, and then mail it in, and then have that affect someone else or a group of their society so negatively that they would then respond and cause racism or anger or protest.
Right.
There's the immediate aspect of it and the third party meddling influence of it that has an entirely other effect, really. And the internet just makes the internet much more powerful, much more dangerous.
Well, also, Matt, besides foreign powers, internal disputes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Dan talked about on our podcast, right? You have Fox News and MSNBC, right? You have everybody getting a different story. Okay, and he said history's always been like that. Well, yeah, but now it's only more so, right? You have social media companies with echo chambers and stuff, and you have all of these. You can easily see how social media and the news in general has found it profitable to push us towards hating each other. And can we adjust and stop that cycle? Or do we learn to ignore that? And do we overcome that before we burn everything to the ground? And I think we do, most likely.
That's tough.
But this election year might actually we might see what happens.
Yeah. It's the first deep fake
election. The last one was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Wait now. Yeah.
Now, basically, you're going to have one side thinks the other side's crazy, and it's both sides think the other side's crazy and doesn't have a clue what's really going on in the world.
Right, and one side's a liar, and they're just cheating and stealing the election. Yeah.
When
it's
really,
tough. It's tough.
They're both idiot assholes that shouldn't be in charge of anything. So what? So if we survive this election, maybe we're good. Maybe this proves that the system is so robust that it can even survive this.
It's a true test of our system. You're right.
James Burke talked about,
a hard one.
He thought the problems that we're having now are because we have systems that were designed to work in an era of scarcity, and we have an era of abundance.
That's a very good point.
Right. But what does a system designed for abundance look like?
We don't know yet, but somebody really needs to drill down on that. Let's get a think tank on the issue.
It makes me wonder if he is thinking that it would have to be something like socialism.
Well, then it would no longer be
abundance. And that I think is honestly true.
Well, you know what? We can't go down this rabbit hole. Okay?
Right. I just wonder, so I'm asking you two, does our modern system adapt, or not our modern system, break it down, the Constitution, okay, can that work in time, an era of abundance instead of an era of scarcity?
I don't see why not.
I don't know. Think about it. Our system was designed originally so that you had to own property to vote, right? That's a big deal. Now we have everybody gets a vote with no test or any kind of requirement
or understanding. You don't have to understand anything to be able to vote.
You don't have to prove you can. Like that, you don't even have to prove you could read. Right? And I understand where the problems with that come, because that was often used as a way to disenfranchise people. Right? For reasons that we would say are not cool. But if you look at where things are going right now, I think you could make a strong argument that the elites in this country don't actually believe in democracy.
Well, what we're seeing is something akin to the Roman Empire when, God, I don't remember.
You mean the Republic?
Yeah. Where whoever promised the most and gave the most was going to win the election.
And that's always
populism, man. Good old-fashioned
that's democracy. And that's why populism. We didn't have a democracy in the first place. Well, right? That's why we had a republic.
Sure.
Okay. And also, the only people who were voting were people who paid the taxes. So right now, that's one of the ways I've said we could fix all of this is that you have a national sales tax. So everybody's paying taxes. So then everybody actually has some skin in the game when they're voting for programs.
But then you'll still have people that just say, yeah, I don't care, spend the tax.
Some of them, but less.
Well, look at California. It took a long time for California.
Yeah, but they're asking the government to pay their bill. They don't pay it.
Well, but California has been taxing their population to death. And they keep...
Because they had all the resources for a long time. There was a wealth of natural resources. I mean, California should be the best state in the country.
Sure.
Just by sheer size, natural resources, weather, everything. Like everything's going for it. And that's what happens sometimes. You get all those things and you take it for granted and you run it into the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe that's what's going to happen. And maybe that's what's going to happen with the whole country. I don't know. But our systems, I can't think of a system that would work in a time of abundance because James Burke seems to take it for granted that humans can adapt to that. But there are millions of years of evolution that caused us to be the way we are. And Dan asked him specifically about this, drugs and depression, and he thinks that's something where we're just adapting. We have to adapt to the transition to an era of abundance. But I think there's something to be said that humans do not do well with abundance. They need struggle because that's what's built into us through our DNA. And I don't know if you can overcome 300 million years of evolution or 100 million years of evolution because we have big brains. I mean, maybe.
If we continually revert to old forms to deal with new developments, we'll never get anywhere.
I don't know if I agree with that, Matt, because those old forms, they were based on understanding human nature.
Understanding human nature, yeah, but I mean, human nature has to change. I mean, evolution means you're changing, and if you are presented with a new environment, rising to the challenge,
right,
in a way of wisdom, is the way you progress. And I was referring to Scott's statement about did he mean socialism? Well, is that the only thing we have to fall back on? I mean, is there not some new form of governance or civilization that we can develop to deal with this time of abundance? That don't just call it socialism. Like, figure out something new.
I don't know.
So if you did, let's just say just for sake of argument, let's just say we're at the peak. We're at the peak of abundance, and it's downhill for the next.
Well, that's not what he was arguing.
No, I know.
Okay,
I know.
Okay.
But I'm just saying. So you reform our system for abundance, right? And then the next 20 years, it's just gonna let's just say it's no longer abundance.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So then what happens? That system crashes immediately.
Right.
Stability based on prediction, based on the worst case scenario, right? Is that where you're going with it?
Well, worst case scenario.
It seems to work.
Pretty bad.
Yeah. It seems to work. It seems to work. I mean, we elect people to govern our society, and they have to be far seeing. They can't just be like, oh, you want that? Okay, let's do it now. Oh, well, it didn't work. They have to be like, look, we have studied all of history, and we are pretty sure that, okay, this is going to be good right now, but in 20 years, it's going to be completely different. So we need to be stable along the way, So that would speak to that, Scott. I agree with that. Yeah,
but tough. Unfortunately, our system's not geared that way. So everybody's looking towards the next election.
It swings back and forth.
It's all short term. Who can outspend
whoever promises the most?
There you go.
That is the drawback of a democracy.
Sure,
it just is, and unfortunately, well, okay. One of the things that we have to avoid those things are the checks and balances, right? So at least the system is based on the idea that the kind of people who are going to end up in power in general are going to be the ones who are wanting power. So we have to have checks on their power. So even if you have corrupt or you have people who are not the best, you're still going to end up with the best system of government because they can only do so much damage, when in other countries the amount of damage they can do is not checked. Right. I cannot imagine a system that works better with abundance, but takes into account human nature. Because the reason we have this abundance is because of this system, right? That's the reason that we have it. So if we throw this system out for something like James Burke was talking about,
and you're talking about capitalism, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's why
yeah.
you can have this abundance.
But the argument is, so just so you know, George, the U.S. isn't a strict capitalism.
Oh, I know.
We're a mixed system. We're a little bit of capitalism, a little bit of socialism.
No, we're a lot of capitalism with a little bit of socialism. Yes.
Maybe 75-25.
Maybe. It's probably not even that much. But we focus on the socialism aspects. But most of everything that we have that's good in this country and the amazing things that have happened in the last 300 years happened after capitalism was invented.
Sure.
Dan talks about all the time how I mean Dan talks about all the time how history until he talked about it on a podcast with us. Till the last 50 or 100 years, basically things were so slow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what sped everything up? When did that speed up? Capitalism. Industrial revolution. That led to technology increasing at a much faster rate, which then exponentially grew because it spread out the access to the information, which increased the number of people who could think about the information, which increased the inventions.
Yeah.
That all comes from capitalism. Okay? And that's why when we talk to Josh,
Josh Dwyer.
Josh Dwyer, when we talked to a socialist or a communist, really. That's what we talked about. All of these amazing things that we have in our life, those go away without the system that allows for them to be invented. And so we're talking to James. When you listen to James Burke, I don't know that what he thinks would work. And so we just kind of have to muddle along with our system the best we can and try to fix it as we can. Like that's what we need to do right now. We need to get back to the Constitution and a lot more. To me, that would fix a lot of the problems. But there is still the human nature element with abundance. And James Burke when Dan asked him this specifically, drug overdoses and depression, those are skyrocketing. He says, we're just in a transition phase. I don't know. This was in 2007, right?
Yeah.
It's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
Look at the opiate deaths.
Well,
that's because there's so many people unhappy. That's not because those drugs are so good people want to take them until they die, right? That's not why those things happen.
Sure.
Okay? There is a real issue with humans needing to struggle.
I know I've said this plenty of times, but if anybody says anything about it, especially like a utopian environment, a utopian system,
mm-hmm.
And I kind of brought this up. I know I brought this up to other people as well, but probably not on this podcast. But it's just like, and I hate to use movie references because it's not written in stone. It's all whatever, doesn't matter. So like the Matrix, when they said, we created this utopia and you humans kept pushing against it and it didn't work because you had to have some strife or you had to have hardship. So, and I think that's just ingrained in humans and human nature where we have to strive for something to overcome.
It's
What's
not
at the
just
top of the
human
mountain?
nature. It's in every species. That's how evolution works.
Sure, but it's what's at the top of the mountain. Then you're looking down the mountain saying, what the hell's down there?
It's how evolution works, but it's
there's
also
a reason
variations.
There's a reason why gazelles aren't building spaceships, and there's a reason why primates evolved into humans. Is because we were faced with challenges as far as survival and environmental factors that cause us to evolve into predators and to adapt to and modify our environment.
Big brain.
This is why we have that spirit of exploration in us that led us to populate the entire world.
But that's saying
unique.
Ambition.
Well, fairly
okay.
Unique.
Sure. Ambition is a trait that is required for evolution to work. Okay, now it's not. It's not.
There's species of centipede that haven't evolved in millions of years, and they're perfectly adapted to their environment. And if you brought them out of their environment, they would have to adapt.
But what you're not thinking about there, Matt, is all the species that evolved off of those centipedes, right? So yeah, there's those centipedes that are still there. But how many species branched off over those last 100 million years? Because, the point, the way I was trying to say this, okay, is the way species, they struggle, okay, and through that struggle is how mutations. Struggle occurs naturally. Okay.
Why are giraffes' necks so long? They needed to reach the leaves.
Well, but struggle occurs naturally, right? So it does. It's a trait that's built into the system. Okay. So without the struggle, some certain percentage of people just will in any animal, especially the smarter the animal is, the truer this is. The more depressed they're going to be, but not the species. But I mean, there's always variations within species. But okay, so you look at lions in the zoos, right? They used to just put the food out there.
Yeah.
They realized that those lions would just get lazy and depressed.
Yeah.
So they started hiding the food and making them work for it. And then those lions led a much better improved life.
Sure.
That's what happens with humans.
Sure.
Okay, and it doesn't happen to everybody. But a certain percentage of people, that's true. And it's a high percentage. So can you have abundance with not all the other drawbacks? Like James Burke seems to think we'll be able to figure that out.
I think I've thought about this, and I think there would be internal conflict, that humans do crave some kind of conflict or struggle.
Oh, 100%.
I think it is. Yeah, I absolutely do. Yeah,
but that tears the society down. Yeah. It can, right? Because look at our country is so rich that people are fighting about.
We're seeing that the most piddly little things. Well, yeah, I'm not going to just immediately go there, but we do.
Oh, I do, Matt, because I think it's absurd.
We do have the freedom. we have the freedom and the luxury to bicker and be concerned about things that are not even on the radar scope of other people. That's why I listen to like Russian punk rock, because they have something to complain about. You know what I mean? Not that some Americans don't, but generally speaking,
100%.
Go get your Jack in the Box drive-through and go home and watch Family Guy. It's very luxurious. Yeah. And at that point,
poor people here are fat.
Yeah. Well,
that's an amazing thing. Now my buddy is a Mason, and he's Masons, he's my age, but Masons typically are older. And he's got this old guy that's from Eastern Europe. And he's like, I love this country. It is so amazing. Your poor people are fat. That's amazing, because poor people starve to death in most times in human history.
Think of that. It says a lot.
That's shitty, right?
It says a lot.
Think about that. Something you don't see when you live here. You don't think about.
But then when you have poor people, so here's another angle to that. Who's most likely to commit a crime? People who are starving.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
They're more likely to go steal some food.
Now, there's no reason to steal food in America.
But because we feed them.
Yeah, but the point is, so most crime, that is something that you hear pushed all the time, right? Crime is committed by the poor, right? But actually, it's not.
If they're starving, they will.
Yeah, but in America, nobody starves to death.
That's not my point. My point is the rate of crime for theft or stealing for people to feed themselves is almost non-existent. Because that's why.
Because we have ways for them to get food.
Correct.
Right.
That's
good.
The only point I was trying.
But the unintended consequences of that are far-reaching. So that's the problem, right?
Sure.
There's no free lunch. Everything we do has a trade-off. So to transition to an era of abundance and think that we can just figure this stuff out, maybe. And really, it's going to be interesting where it goes in the next 30 years, because now they're figuring out all this longevity stuff too. right? They're figuring out all kinds of fascinating stuff about the human brain and the human body and the human genome, the human epigenome. We were talking about CRISPR, all this stuff.
Didn't they replace a human kidney with a mechanical kidney and it worked?
I don't know.
I swear to God, they put their
Sure, but Scott, they're going to 3D print a new kidney that's made out of your own tissue.
That's for yeah.
So you won't need a mechanical, or they'll just throw some CRISPR in there and tell your body, or some nanobots, and tell your body to build a new freaking, shoot some of your own stem cells and have your body grow a new kidney.
That's even scarier.
But that's a real thing too. And then Neuralink and nano. Again, if we survive all this shit in a couple hundred years, things might be amazing.
Well,
yeah.
Or it might be awful. Or it might be 1984. Because that might be the only way to really survive with all this is just real authoritarianism.
No,
I hope not.
No, because really the way to survive is to open up the next frontier. And I think, like you said before, I think Elon's doing that. I think that's and then you have to get some backing, and then you got to get people to.
So we got to ship all these socialists to Mars.
Yeah,
I love it. That's a new program. That's what Elon's really doing.
Or the moon.
That's what Elon's really doing.
They have their own commune on the moon.
Yeah.
You guys share whatever that.
That's not what's going to happen.
Good luck.
It'll be the adventurous people that we need here that are going to go.
Sure.
But not all of them. Just like the people who left Europe and went.
Did you ever watch?
It's the crazy fuckers.
Did you ever watch The Expanse?
I read the books.
Right on. Kind of like The Expanse when the Martians and the Belters thought everybody on Earth is a bunch of layabouts, and really there's just no jobs, and everybody's just kind of living off the government dime.
That's the worry, because then everything goes to shit.
Sure.
Independence,
so anyway,
we need it.
That and I know I brought this up. Is what's interesting to me, and this is the most fascinating thing that James Burke was working on. I think George, you said that that didn't come to fruition. Was the Neuralink net, or the net that he was?
Not Neuralink net.
I know, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
the net or what?
Basically, he created this. He was trying to spearhead this idea in this to try to teach people history. He talks about this in the podcast. Teach people everything all at once instead of teaching them based on subjects and easily gradable things, right?
Yeah.
So showing the connections throughout history to everything, math and technology and art and literature.
Very important.
It's all interconnected.
So he went.
It really
is.
is.
From Mozart to the helicopter in
10 jumps.
And 10 jumps, but and referencing music only one more time. So
just showing who feeds off who and how we get to where we're at.
But that's the reason why I think that's so fascinating is, I might come to a conclusion in 5 jumps with my brain, and you might come to the same conclusion in 10 jumps with yours.
Right.
Or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just how your brain processes information,
right?
With how you learned, and then what you're linking to what.
100%.
I just think that's very fascinating.
Because everybody's brains have their own experiences,
sure.
And so they can make intuitive leaps that other people might not be able to. And then some people's brains just suck.
And it depends on what you learn. Maybe if we did the same thing with somebody else other than James Burke and said, how do you get from Mozart to the helicopter in 10 jumps or less, and somebody could do it in 5?
Oh, probably. But you'd have to have all the information
or
knowledge.
Yeah, of who knows who.
Okay.
Anyway.
Anything else from the podcast with James Burke that you want to talk about?
It's called the Knowledge Web. I just looked at
the Knowledge Web. Good job. Thank you very much, Matt.
That was a good overview.
You Jamie.
Do you guys want to talk about your interview with Dan?
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of great points in there, man.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What'd you say, Matt?
I mean, I have some standouts. What stood out for you?
Just how awesome he was to talk to.
He's a chill guy, right?
So it was so easy to talk to him, and he just made it comfortable. He sounds. Yeah. It sounded like we were in my ear. Sounded like we were doing a hardcore history podcast. We were just sitting in a hardcore history podcast in person.
Yep.
But then he would answer a question. So it's like the dream because you're listening to hardcore history and you come up with a question. History. Yeah, that's what it is, right?
That's insane.
Think about that, right? What if you could AI Dan Carlin because there are hundreds of hours of him available.
That's true.
They could plug all that into a thing and make an
I actually
Dan
tried
Carlin
to do that
bot.
for our server. I tried to make that because in my other community we have a Dune bot where you like type in a question and it answers in the response of a certain author. And I tried to do that. I was like, I want to make a Dan bot where you're like, tell me about this period of history and an answer in the style of Dan Carlin, and it would not poach from his copyrighted content. So unfortunately, that's impossible.
So Dan needs to make this bot.
He does.
He needs to make this.
That's how he retires. That's how he makes $1 billion.
Dude, I mean, I'd pay $5 for that app.
I would.
Or $10 or whatever it was, so I could just be like, Alexa, tell me everything that Dan Carlin's ever said about this subject, and it just does it in his voice.
Great. Talking to you now.
Yeah, the government's listening. Anyway, it was talking to Dan was fun.
It was.
Well, congratulations, you guys. You knocked it out of the ballpark.
Well, I appreciate that, Matt.
I mean.
Yeah, he was.
We talked about a lot of the same things that we talked about from this podcast. It's kind of funny when we're listening to this James Burke episode for this. I was like, "Oh shit! Did I just poach all the ideas?" Not even realizing because I hadn't listened to this in probably a year, or at least months and months. And we talked about a lot of the same stuff. And I'm like, "Oh crap!" And then he gets to the end, he's like, "Everybody steals."
Yeah,
exactly. That's what James Burke says in the podcast. All right. Well, that makes me feel a little better. He said, I took that idea. You take it. I stole it. You steal it.
Go for it, my boy. We stand on the shoulders of
giants.
He goes,
what, do you think you were born with ideas?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Some people.
Yeah. It's interesting.
We'd have to talk
yeah. And I saw on Twitter, Dan actually shared that he has a skin cancer diagnosis.
That's unfortunate.
It's not, he said it was not dangerous. Or not the deadly kind. So that's good.
Melanoma.
He didn't even say that.
Well,
he just said, he literally just put in parentheses, not deadly.
Gotcha.
The man lives in Oregon, for Pete's sake.
Yeah. Well, he said, he said growing up on the beach
that's right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. His whole childhood, just basically spending his whole time on the beach is why he always wears a hat now. So then he commented that he might have to get a bigger hat. So then somebody goes, a sombrero is like a hat, only more so. And I was like, I had a comment on there. You win. Like, you nailed it. That's the perfect take. Only more so. So Matt, you recently bought a ticket to Dan's show.
I did.
Out your way, right? You excited for that?
Yeah. It's a little out of my way, but it's the closest to me, and I just can't miss it. Yeah, I'm very excited.
Sweet.
I'm looking to see the format. I don't know if he's going to have a guest or it's just going to be him taking questions all night, which would be great. I hope to talk to him a little bit, and at the very least, I'm just supporting his live tour.
He said it's going to be similar to kind of like what we did with him, where
very cool.
There's going to be some kind of planned stuff, and then more just answering questions and.
I know exactly what I'm going to ask him if I get a chance at the microphone. So, yeah, I plan on hogging the microphone.
It's not the one you sent me because we already asked him for you.
I got other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I hope he comes by us. If he does, we're going to have to go.
Oh, for sure.
If they do well enough, and that's all I'm trying to do is just push them to keep going.
I tell you what. I'm telling you, Matt, if he comes by us, we're going to fly you out here.
That'd be great.
To do an episode of the podcast when we go to the live show. And if we're going to try to talk
George,
do trivia.
George, people can't fly, George.
Yeah, but they can.
Horses can't fly.
Horses can't.
Thank you for understanding that reference, Scott. I brought him all the way back. All right.
I love the callbacks. I love the callbacks.
Yeah, I'd love to hang out with you guys, see what the beer's like in Michigan, man, and do a live show. That'd be great with you guys.
Yeah, some good spots.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do a live show onto the Discord too, so that'd be cool. But anyway, okay, everybody. Check out the link in the description for Dan's website to find the old episodes. Also, to find on his front page of his website is information about the live shows. If you live in, what were the cities? New York, Portland.
It's a lot.
Yeah. No, there's only 4.
I think it was LA.
York, Portland,
like
LA.
I thought it was 3.
No, it's 4. But anyway, those are the big 3. There's nothing in the Midwest yet. It might be in Seattle too. No. But
No, it's not Seattle. If it was Seattle, I would have gone to Seattle. Yeah.
Right. Anyway,
I'll look him up right now.
If you're near one, yeah, Scott's looking it up too. If you're near one of those cities, go see his show so that he does more. There are still seats available.
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. That's what it was. So go check it out, and then hit us up on the Discord. Let us know how you liked it. If it was awesome,
please do. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Share pictures or anything. Yeah.
We're going to be doing another trivia coming up here soon. So if you tuned in, if this is your shit, I'm going to go ahead and put some intro at the beginning because I should have done something about, hey, if you're just joining us for the first time after listening to Dan's interview, here's what we normally do. And I didn't do any of that. I'll just edit all that in.
It might get weird.
And I'm not going to cut this out.
George got it weird.
I'm not going to cut this out because I don't believe in that. I like to let people see how the sausage is made. All right. Anything before we wrap this up, guys?
I think
it was
Matt,
fantastic.
Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah,
I love talking about this episode. James Burke was fascinating.
Great episode. Mm-hmm.
If James Burke listens to this, please,
hit us
up.
Let
us interview. That would be amazing.
Yeah, you want to come on? What I would really like is for Dan to interview James Burke again. 12 years or 16 years later.
There was some stuff in there that was kind of dated. I'd love an update on that.
Right. Like, hey, what do you think now? Is social media going to kill everybody or not? Like, that's what I want to know.
You're going from like MySpace to the inception of Facebook.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we're at Twitter, Instagram.
You have the beautiful things of it, the Arab Spring, all that stuff. And then, anyway. It'd be fascinating to hear an update.
What do you guys got coming up?
So we're going to be doing another trivia, and actually I was going to talk to you about that, Matt. I was thinking Thor's Angels.
That'd be great. I love that one.
Okay, and then check the link in the description. So Dan recommended a book that we are going to do for the book club event.
Yep.
We will do an announcement for that, but it is by
Eve Ball.
Eve Ball, and what is the name of the book again, Matt? It was
Indy, a fascinating account of Apache history and ethnography. So yeah,
boom! It's going to be awesome because we're gonna do that for the book club event, and then we're going to do an episode about hardcore histories.
Apache Tears.
We're going to do an episode about hardcore histories Aztec series, and then we'll be doing Apache Tears, which is Dan Carlin's episode about where the Eve Ball won. So we'll do that first, actually. So we'll do the book club, Apache Tears, and then we'll do the Aztec Empire, rest is history. So we're going to go, after the next trivia, we're going to go Native American hardcore.
It's going to be deep.
It's going to be fun.
That's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So check that out. Look at the link in the description for the Discord channel to get the date for the book club. I will also throw it up on Twitter. And look for that. And thank you very much for watching.
Yep. Thank you.
Right on, guys.
Thanks, Matt.